Direct News TV. August 24, 2023. Russia-Ukraine War Live, Prigozhin talented man who made mistakes, Putin. Ukraine's President Zelensky says Kyiv not involved in reported death of Yevgeny Prigozhin. Prigozhin listed among the 10 passengers reportedly killed and a private jet crashed north of Moscow. The Kremlin has not yet confirmed his death. Analyst: Wagner played pivotal role in Syria. The Wagner Group played a key role in Russia's bid to bolster the government of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, participating in ground operations and inserting itself into economic enterprises such as mining and oil and gas. The group also recruited Syrians to take part in operations in foreign countries. Relative to other countries, I think their role in Syria has proven more pivotal, because they were involved in direct clash on the ground, political analyst Karam Shar told Al Jazeera. However, their role recently, at least militarily, has waned. No data to support missile strike theory for plane crash, Pentagon. The U.S. Department of Defense has said there was currently no information to suggest that a surface-to-air missile took down the plane presumed to be carrying Prigozhin. Air Force Brigadier General Patrick Ryder, a Pentagon spokesperson, offered no evidence or further details on what U.S. officials believe caused the crash as he made his remarks at a Pentagon news conference. UN criticizes targeting of civilians in Ukraine. The United Nations has criticized targeted attacks on civilians in the Ukraine conflict. In recent weeks, dozens of civilians have also been killed in attacks, UN Political Affairs Envoy Rosemary DiCarlo told the UN Security Council in New York on Thursday. In some instances, sequential or double-tap strikes have killed and injured not only civilian residents, but first responders who rushed to help, DiCarlo added. What's the political impact in Russia of the plane crash? List of passengers on the plane that crashed on Wednesday included Wagner Group chief Yevgeny Prigozhin. Was it an accident or payback from the Kremlin? The only thing beyond doubt about what happened is the wreckage of the plane that was scattered far and wide. Russia's aviation agency said there were no survivors from among the 10 people on board. U.S. planning give F-16 training to Ukraine pilots. The U.S. military says that it is planning to train Ukrainian pilots to use its state-of-the-art F-16 fighter jets on U.S. soil. The pilots are set to receive English classes from September and flight training will start in October, Pat Ryder, spokesman of the U.S. Department of Defense, said. Wagner leadership meeting in session to decide fate of Group, AJ correspondent. According to social media channels aligned with the Wagner Group, there is a special committee that has been in session, Al Jazeera's Dorsa Jabari, reporting from Moscow, said. This is something that was planned out by Prigozhin himself in the event of his own death, Jabari said. We understand that those meetings are underway, according to those sources, who say that in time they will issue a statement about what will happen to the Wagner Group and their fighters, she added. We don't know what these committees look like, who they comprise of, it's very, very secretive. For the time being the group continues to be operational, Jabari said. We haven't had any official statements from the Russian government or the Belarusian officials who are housing the Wagner Group since the failed mutiny 2 months ago. Who else was aboard the private jet before it crashed? 10 people, including other senior figures from Prigozhin's Wagner mercenary group, reported by Russia's aviation agency Rosaviatsia to have been on board the Emperor Legacy 600 executive jet. Everyone knows it was the Russians, analyst. Mark Temnicky, non-resident fellow with the Atlantic Council, believes Russia was behind Prigozhin's death. Everyone knows it was the Russians who did this, Temnicky told Al Jazeera. I think that this is Putin showing his power and showing his adversaries and opponents that he means business, he's in charge of Russia and this is a mafia state, Temnicky said. Putin also wants to show that he will do incredibly horrible things to his opponents to make sure he remains in power. According to Temnicky, the Wagner Group may soon cease to exist, and some of its fighters are being forced to sign contracts with the Russian military. If they don't comply, it is possible they would be imprisoned, or be killed, or exiled, he added. It was better for Putin not to wait many hours before address, his former spokesman says. Sergei Markov, former public spokesman for Putin, said for the Russian leader, the Kremlin, and the authorities, it was better not to wait so many hours before making remarks. It would be better not to wait so many hours, but to give some version of what happened as soon as possible, Markov told Al Jazeera, commenting on the timing of Putin's address, which came some 24 hours after the plane crash. Instead of blaming Ukraine, Markov said, Putin is too devoted to the law and is waiting at least for the result of the investigation. Russian activist handed 8 years jail in absentia. Russian blogger and political activist Maxim Katz was sentenced in absentia to 8 years jail, after he was accused of spreading fake news about the Russian army. Katz, who left Russia after the start of Moscow's offensive in Ukraine, regularly criticizes the conflict in his YouTube channel with more than 1.8 million subscribers. The court in Moscow ruled that Katz, under the guise of reliable reports, was guilty of publicly spreading false information about the Russian army, the TASS state news agency reported. According to the Rossiyskaya Gazeta government newspaper, the charge was related to a YouTube video from April 2022 where he allegedly accused the army of targeting civilians in Ukraine. U.S. sanctions Russians over Ukraine children deportations. The United States has imposed new sanctions on Russian officials and groups over what rights organizations call the forced transfer of thousands of Ukrainian children. Russia's campaign of cruelty continues to this day, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield said. The United States will not stand by as Russia carries out these war crimes and crimes against humanity. The U.S. said it was imposing sanctions on 11 Russian individuals, including a number of children's rights regional commissioners, blocking any U.S. assets and making U.S. transactions with them a crime. The sanctions also targeted the Artek summer camp in Russian-annexed Crimea and an alleged re-education camp for children in Chechnya. The Department of State also said it would restrict visas to 3 Russians involved in the forcible transfer of children in Ukrainian territories under Moscow's control. Russia has denounced the allegations. The rise and fall of Yevgeny Prigozhin, profile of Wagner chief. Investigators focusing on 3 key things, journalist tells AJ. Reporting from Moscow, journalist Daniel Hawkins tells Al Jazeera investigators are focusing on 3 things. One thing is to formally identify the bodies of those involved in the crash. They are also focusing on the plane movements around the aircraft, particularly who had access to the aircraft before it took off. Investigators have been interviewing people, looking at CCTV footage and working at the site, Hawkins said. They have also been looking at various theories as to how this aircraft came down. Predominantly, the theory Russian media has been discussing is some sort of explosion on board, possibly some sort of explosive device in the chassis of the aircraft which broke off the aircraft's wing. Another version is there was some sort of weapons, grenade explosives on board, which were not safely and securely stored that could have contributed to an explosion on board as well. Hawkins stressed that these are just speculations and theories being looked at by the investigators who are also looking for black boxes, the voice recordings, to piece together exactly what happened. Prigozhin, a talented person, who made mistakes. In his remarks, Putin said, "I knew Prigozhin for a very long time, since the early 90s. He was a man of complicated fate, and he made serious mistakes in his life, but he achieved the right results. He was a talented person, a talented businessman. He worked not only in our country, and worked with results, but also abroad, in Africa, in particular. He was involved there with oil, gas, precious metals and stones. As far as I know, he just returned yesterday from Africa. He met some officials here. But what is quite definite, the head of the investigative committee reported to me this morning, is they have already begun a preliminary investigation into this event. And it will be carried out in full, and taken right to the end." Putin has expressed condolences over the Prigozhin plane crash. Putin praised Prigozhin as a talented businessman and said he wished to express sincere condolences to the families of those who died. He added in televised comments that it was necessary to await the outcome of the official investigation into the crash, in which all 10 people on board were killed. The Russian president said the inquiry would take some time. He said Prigozhin was a talented man who made mistakes and the Wagner crash victims made a significant contribution in Ukraine. My name is Kingsley. Please like, share, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be the first to be notified whenever we post. You won't regret it.